Hello and welcome to Antinatalism This week. I will review the stories about antinatalism that happened during the week. The first story is technically not an antinatalist story but a child-free by choice story. There was an article published by CNN about growing number of women going child-free by choice. The article was pretty run-of-the-mill article. It was similar article to all of the child-free articles where you interview three or four women, talk about their choices, why they are going child free or they've gone child free, and the problems they face, like societal pressure and so on. So, nothing remarkable there. But what was thing to note was that it was an article published by a big mainstream media like CNN. That was point number one. And the second point is it mentioned a growing number of women are going child free and it is part of a trend. The next study is by Gallup. Gallup is an analytics and advisory firm. They do data analytics and based on that advice, different firms and businesses. They have published a study which says that Americans have a desire for larger families. For example, this chart shows views of Americans on ideal number of children for a family to have. 2% think that it is zero children. So this would be a mix of child-free and antinatalists. 3% think one child is ideal number of children to have a family. 44% think it's two children. 29% think it is three, and 12% think it is four. The study note that, and I quote, Americans' preferences for smaller families, which has been the norm from past 50 years, is shifting as their view of ideal number of children in a family has crept up to highest level since 1973. Still, the US birth rate remains low compared to 1970s, suggesting that Americans' views of ideal may not be their personal reality. This means that although they desire to have large families, desire to have large number of children, they are actually not having those many number of children. The average of all the desired numbers comes out to be 2.7 children, whereas the actual fertility rate of United States of America, as shown on this chart, is about 1.7. So there's a large difference between what they desire and what the reality is. Next, a paper titled A Sino-African Perspective and the Morality of Procreation claims to provide a new argument against antinatalism. From the abstract, current studies of antinatalism have been carried out mainly in the context of Western philosophy. In this article, we offer a pro-natalist view based on Confucian and Afro-communitarian philosophy, Sino-African ethics. Grounded in this Sino-African perspective, we uphold that there is at least one reason to believe that not only is it morally permissible to procreate, but also that on some occasions, procreating is what morally prescribes. Now, I don't have access to this paper because this has been put behind a paywall, but the last sentence of that abstract gives us some clue of what this paper is talking about. Specifically, we contend that from a Sino-African perspective, procreating sometimes is the best way to fulfill duties of reciprocity and care towards our parents. Now, if this is really the argument that they are making, then I think it is easy to refute their argument because it is based on an assumption that we have duties of reciprocity to our parents, which in turn is based on an assumption that we are benefited by being brought into existence by our parents. And I mean biological parents here. This is already defeated by antinatalist conclusions, but I haven't read the full paper, so this is only a guess. Next is a study titled Intelligence and Antinatalist Intentions on Dating Sites, an analysis of OkCupid dataset by Emil Kierkegaard and Edward Dutton. The study starts by mentioning another research by somebody called Helmut Nyborg. Nyborg observed that people in developed countries have low fertility rates, and on top of that, these countries are importing people through immigration who have high fertility rate. Based on this, he said that this double whammy will cause decline in IQ and eventual decay of Western civilization. Now you can see where this is going. Nyborg observed that the reason why developed countries have low fertility rate was because smart people have other desires than just having children. Desires like money, desires like status, career, and so on. Along with that, in combination to easily available contraception, that produces very low fertility rate. Emil and Edward think that there is more to it than just this much. They studied OkCupid's database to measure intelligence of people based on the answers that they give on those dating sites. Based on that, what they have found is that there is a correlation between intentions to have children and intelligence. They think that intelligent people, the higher their intelligence is, the lower their intention to have children. So it is not just the external factors that are restricting them from having children, but their intentions are also less. They have less desires to have children. So they are establishing a correlation between intention to have children and intelligence, which they say is a negative correlation. This they call as dysgenics because it seems to select out the trait of intelligence as opposed to eugenics. Eugenics is a term which indicates that you're trying to select a certain trait by breeding more people of that trait. Dysgenics, on the as an antonym to eugenics, is to select out a certain trait, and in this case, they're saying it is a dysgenics of intelligence that is happening. This is just a roundabout way of saying that intelligent people have less children, and therefore intelligence is going to select out, and we would end up with a society with lower IQ compared to high intelligence people, and that would lead to a lot of suffering. There's a lot of other nonsense in this paper, but the main point to note is that if you consider antinatalism without considering the arguments for antinatalism, then you're going to run wild into unhinged correlations without having any effect on validity of antinatalism itself. Now, IQ can have correlation to genetics, and some level of intelligence is required for us to understand antinatalism, but it is not so high that only the Einsteins of the world can understand antinatalism. There have been studies about fertility patterns of second generation of immigrants. For example, this paper, The Convergence of Second Generation Immigrants, Fertility Patterns in France, the role of socio-cultural distance between parents and host country. This paper says, and I quote, women of South Asian descent deviate from the fertility pattern of their parents, while those of Turkish descent preserve their parents' cultural heritage. These paths of adaptation between groups partly reflect cultural difference between parents' country and host country. They also depend on family social capital, family structure, family value. Access to a higher level of education is a crucial factor in erasing differences between groups. So, if the correlation of IQ, genetics, and antinatalism is so tightly coupled, or if it was so tightly coupled, how do you explain this phenomenon where second generation immigrants, their fertility pattern eventually converges with the fertility patterns of the host country? Next is an invitation to publish papers on antinatalism by a platform called Gender Campus. Gender Campus is a platform for Swiss universities. They are calling for papers on the topic of antinatalism and selection. As per their website, the aim is to attract contributions that address the questions of selection and not having children. The last date of submission of the paper is 26 November 2023. Finally, we have a couple of very good YouTube videos. Lawrence Anton did a live stream replying and responding to the conversation about antinatalism between Cosmic Skeptic and Human Hancock. And earlier to that, he also did an interview about Israel, about antinatalism in Israel. Those were the stories that caught my eye during the week. Let me know if I've missed anything, and let me know if you have any stories for me to cover. Thank you.